The Nanjing Massacre by Adrian Sharon. The Nanjing Massacre, or Rape of Nanjing, was an episode of mass murder and mass rape committed by Imperial Japanese troops against the civilians of Nanjing throughout the Second Sino-Japanese War. The massacre occurred over a 6-week period starting on December 13, 1937, the day that Japanese captured Nanjing. According to Timothy Brooks's documentation of the Rape of Nanjing, the crimes committed by the Japanese were not just limited to that time period. Many atrocities were reported to have been admitted as early as the Japanese Army's advancement from Shanghai to Nanjing itself. During this interval, soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army murdered Chinese civilians and disarmed combatants on scales as high as an estimated 40,000 to over 300,000 and perpetrated widespread rape and looting. The Nanjing garrison force also set fire to buildings, homes, military barracks, and also private land close to the north, as well as the areas in the south and eastern region city gates. Political background. As Joshua Flogel states, the Nanjing Massacre sparked from a contentious political issue and a stumbling block in Sino-Japanese relations. In 1931, the Japanese, searching for raw materials and markets, invaded Manchuria and created a puppet state. During the next few years, they took more Chinese territory and more conflicts. Then a minor incident on July 7, 1937, over a railroad bridge was provoked, and Japan launched a full invasion on China. By August, the Japanese army was soon attacking Shanghai. Eventually, the Chinese leader, known as Chiang Kai-shek, decided to make the government move to Nanjing. The battle for Shanghai was bloody and it ended in a Japanese victory, thus causing the invaders to turn their eyes toward Nanjing altogether. What caused the genocide? So first, I believe that the cause of the genocide was a culmination of numerous commodities. First, we have to think of the situation and relations at the time between China and Japan that led to the massacre to try to understand the roots of such a terrible episode. First of all, the Japanese common person was taught that he was superior, in particular superior to Chinese people, that as a consequence was considered as a non-entity from the point of view of the human condition. To make an example, you can think of the attitude of the German troops during Operation Barbarossa against Soviet Union, where the Russian peasant, soldier, or other was considered subhuman and so not deserving any mercy or piety. Second, we have to look at the terrible conditions of the Japanese soldier in terms of harshness and brutal treatment in the army. The Japanese soldier was literally brutalized by his superiors and most of the times by his comrades as well. The idea of being merciful or kind was considered almost as an act of treason and probably punished pretty harshly. This doesn't serve as an excuse for the atrocities committed during the massacre, but only a way to rationalize the incredible fact where a perfectly normal and probably kind person in normal life could and would turn into a bloodthirsty monster. A final possible cause of the genocide was the exasperation of the Japanese forces that, after suffering heavy losses during the previous battle for Shanghai by the hand of a surprisingly efficient and heroic Chinese army, basically wanted revenge. How did the population allow this to happen? Now, I wouldn't say the rest of the world essentially allowed this to happen, because the pillaging of the Japanese was swept under the rug. Many parts of the world did not hear about the Nanking Massacre until years after it occurred, so stumping the incident from an outside interference was nearly impossible. The aftermath. In relation to author Frank Gibney's analysis, in 1946, the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal, part of the International Tribunal for the East, was established by the Chinese government. Unfortunately, those soldiers mostly responsible for the genocide escaped punishment, though household names that were accused at the time were General Hisao Tani, Captain Gonkichi Tanaka, and Second Lieutenants uh, Mayuki and Suvoshi Noda were made famous by their contest to kill 100 people using just a sword. In the end, unfortunately, General Tani was the only individual prosecuted and found guilty. The rest of executives were either dead before being sentenced or were given immunity and protection by order of the leader, Chiang Kai-shek. Lastly, how is the event viewed today? As noted in the Dissenting Judgment Journal by Henry Bernard, anger over the events of Nanking continues to color Sino-Japanese relations to this day. The true nature of the massacre has been disputed and exploited for propaganda purposes by historical revisionists, apologists, and Japanese nationalists. Some claim the numbers of deaths have been inflated, while others have denied that any massacre even occurred in the first place. This revisionist view of history is continuing to cause significant friction between Japan and many of our world's countries today. And here's my sources.